Despite Dempster's assertion of having brought Anne and Bradshaw together as lovers in 1972, there are some who believe they had actually gotten to know each other much earlier, when Anna was in her club-hopping mid-teens. I just have this picture in my mind's eye of being in the house in Fillmore Gardens and seeing Bradshaw and Anna go downstairs to her flat, and somebody saying to me, "Are they living together down there?" It was extraordinary because her father was a stern father figure to everybody at the Evening Standard. He was quite possessive. So why would he allow his favorite daughter to be with this charming guy who never earned a penny is a mystery. You guys, tell me what world does a dad and a mom allow their young 14, 15-year-old daughter to have a man living downstairs in her apartment with her? And they are so wildly, naive that they would never suspect that that guy is some kind of predator? Oh, how are you? Welcome to my channel. My name is Denise. We are going to keep going in Front Row, the biography of Anna Wintour by Jerry Oppenheimer. And yesterday we finally got to her and her real job, her first real job. Now, you and I know that she hasn't exactly had the best track record as far as sticking with things. She's a high school dropout and also wasn't able to maintain her interest in the job that her parents had gotten her at Harrods. But she is now a fashion assistant on the new combination of the magazines, Harper's Bazaar and Queen. So they've combined, and now they're Harper's and Queen, and she is one of the 3 fashion assistants on that magazine. Now, they had a pretty small fashion department on this magazine. At the time, it wasn't a big fashion magazine, and so their budget was fairly small. Anna was a huge asset to them because of her connections through her dad. She also had spent most of her life up until this point making connections. As young as 14 to 15, she was out on the streets making all kinds of social connections and hobnobbing with people and networking before that was even a term. And so she had a really, really good eye, not only for fashion, but also for the people who would be compelling fashion. She knew all the young photographers, she knew the makeup artists, the young designers, and so with that personal knowledge and with those personal connections and friendships, she brought a lot with her. So she ended up gaining the job not because her experience was so good, but because she interviewed really well. She was, as we know, very self-possessed, very mature for her age. She was also extremely organized. And her organization and her ability to get things done and, move the ball was 2 things. Obviously a real skill set, but also I think a surprise to me because I didn't realize she had the ability to be so organized, so with it, and I didn't realize that she could drive a project like this. Those skill sets usually show up in a scholastic setting, and we hadn't seen that from her. So I was really impressed on one hand about what I was reading about her ability to move a project, but there's another side that comes up as well in the last chapter, and that is just her overall bitchiness. She was, by every definition, a cruel, cutting, caustic bitch. She didn't care who she was talking to. She would just cut you down so fast. There was something about that personality that really frightened people. Some people could stand up to it. Many people could not, and fell like dominoes in her presence. Something she really despised was weakness. If she could sense weakness, she was like a predatory animal. She would go after you. And we saw her run one girl right out on a rail. And then there was another girl that she worked with who stood up to her, and I think that there was some mutual respect there. I don't think that I would call it friendship, but certainly mutual respect. I'm surprised that someone as young as her has so much dominance over others. She lacks a personality completely. Her only personality trait seems to be cruelty. She is not overly friendly. She isn't somebody who's going to sit down and be real chummy with you, never going to let you in. But I think there's a part to this story that we're missing, and I just want you guys to keep this in the back of your mind as we're reading this. And this is all just my take on it. This is my opinion. This is 110% what I think, not what I've read. I think that Anna's behavior is indicative of somebody who has been victimized. And I think today's story is actually going to compel us all into that direction. I know that Anna's family suffered a really terrible tragedy, and I think that would have a profound effect on the culture in your home. If your parents had lost a child and then their marriage was suffering because of the way they had both separately dealt with that. I do not, however, think, though, that this had to create the character that Anna had. I'm very interested in Anna's need to control everything, but also in her secretive nature. Everybody said she was extremely secretive. And this is a word that comes up almost as often as the word self-possessed. I think that Anna's need to control things, and I think her secretive nature, and I think the fact that she seems to be really attracted to older men is indicative of the fact that I think she was taken advantage of far earlier than any of us were initially told in this book. Now, I think that this book is not going to give us the deep dive we want on this subject, but I think that we're all smart enough to figure out that at this time, the culture in England, there was a huge predatory scene where older men were taking advantage of all these little young girls running to the discos. And there's been plenty written about it, but this book isn't necessarily one that's going to do that. So I think we have to take what we know about that time period, and also just about human nature, and apply it to what we're seeing with Anna. I think in some ways, her caustic and bitchy attitude is driven by a need to protect herself, to attack you before you can attack her. Maybe she's just a really horrible person and was born that way. But some of her behavior does seem possibly indicative of somebody who was used by older men with her father's knowledge. So stick with me today in today's chapter, because I think we need to start piecing together some things. Anna Wintour, I don't think, is just a mean person. I think something happened to her that caused her to act like this. And I think what's even more chilling about it is that I think her parents knew it. And I think their sort of hands-off attitude towards her is potentially driven by the fact that they actually did know what was going on. They just didn't want to talk about it. I don't know. Maybe I'm getting a little too ahead of myself. But today's chapters are called Creative Energy. And then the second one we're going to read is called Meeting Mr. Wrong. I think Mr. Wrong was somebody that actually had been in her life since she was 14. The book's going to talk a little bit about this. I think we need to keep an open mind about what that was about and also how that might have affected her personality. Let's get reading. First chapter today is called Creative Energy, and that chapter is predominantly about her time as an assistant, but specifically about the skill set she brought. So like I said, Anna is actually really good at her job. She is by nature a very controlling person, so being in charge of a photo shoot kind of fits in with her personality. But also, like I said earlier, she's bringing together all kinds of people that she's met over time, and she has a very impressive collection of contacts. So she's invaluable to the small fashion department at this magazine. All right. Anna's first discovery of a new face and potential cover girl at Harper's in Queen was a debutante on the London social scene named Annabel Houghton, who had been a year behind Anna at North London Collegiate. They rode the same underground line, passed in the hall on the way to classes in their drab brown uniforms, nodded at one another, but didn't mix because of the slight age difference. But both were intrigued. I knew of Anna because I liked pretty people, and she was pretty, says Houghton. By the time Anna was promoted to assistant fashion editor in late 1971 under Jennifer Hawking, Houghton was just breaking into the modeling game. She had quite a timely look. Her bright orange bob was cut by Sassoon, and she wore micro miniskirts. She was the real deal. Anna was hooked. Like attracts like, Houghton observes. She discovered me as a model, liked my look, took me under her wing, and gave me my first job. Anna had created a story called London Originals and had booked Houghton for the layout with hopes of getting her on the cover against stiff competition, the stunner Charlotte Rampling, of television's The Avengers fame. Rampling made the cover of the February 1973 issue, but Houghton was one of the featured London beauties, and from there her career took off. Anna had pulled together quite a team for the shoot, including the South African photographer Barry McKinley, who was hot at the time, and the innovative Barbara Daly, who handled the extraordinary makeup for Stanley Kubrick's 1971 terrifying sci-fi classic, A Clockwork Orange, and his 1975 Barry Lyndon. The period photos of the models with crimped hair and marcelled waves were shot in the dramatic Art Nouveau-style apartment of the renowned Chinese art director and designer Barry Wan, whom Anna knew. She was quickly building a reputation of being able to round up the best people and locations, mainly because of her connections through her father, pals like Nigel Dempster, and other well-placed types with whom she networked socially. Her shoots were always very high style and very classy, notes Houghton. Anna would have the best of the new designers, top makeup. She had the most immaculate eye. She never chose mediocrity in any form, and when you get a good team, you get a great shoot. After London Originals, Anna booked Houghton for a shoot in Corsica, with her lover James Wedge as the photographer, with fashions by Missoni and jewelry from the posh London shop Emmeline. everything in coral, ebony, and ivory. Such location shoots usually took about a week. Afterwards, the jeweler gave everyone marvelous bracelets, recalls Houghton, and then we'd go off to San Lorenzo, and we'd all have lunch. Rigid in so many ways, such as with her bob, which she kept for a lifetime, and her signature sunglasses, Anna also never digressed from her luncheon regimen. It was so odd because she had the same meal every day at a little Italian restaurant round the corner from the magazine, says Liz Walker. It was smoked salmon and scrambled eggs. Every single day. She would eat nothing else. She was practicing the high-protein thing even then. We all had at least a glass of wine, but if she did, she drank the tiniest amount. Besides kickstarting the careers of models like Houghton, Anna launched up-and-coming photographers in her early days at Harper's and Queen. One was Eric Bowman, whom Landals describes as a very beautiful, wonderfully blonde and charming college boy who had done some very lovely drawings that had caught his keen art director's eye. Anna had planned to do a feature on lingerie, and Landals, looking for a different slant on what he thought was a boring and cliché subject, asked her to get Bowman to sketch the models. A few days later, the pair appeared at Landal's desk with spectacular photographs of a beautiful girl in underwear sitting at a dressing table in a luxurious room at the Savoy. Anna took a room, and they went there, and those photos were shot, says Landals. So Anna made Eric, an artist, into a photographer. I thought, what vision on her! It was very perceptive of her to know he would be good. I adored the photographs. Maybe Eric said, let me shoot pictures, but the fact that she let him and took the risk of me saying, what the hell are you doing, said something about her. As much as any woman could bond with Anna in those days, Annabelle Houghton did. It was a time of constant partying, with many champagne-filled evenings spent at the Claremont, a posh gambling club on Berkeley Square, or at Annabelle's, or at any of the other chic night spots, where rich and powerful men and beautiful young women on the make gathered in the glitzy disco 70s. Very briefly during this period, Anna dated, among others, Tony Elliott, who, just out of college in 1968, had founded the very successful weekly events listing magazine Time Out, and impresario Michael White, who produced the first London stage performance of the Rocky Horror Show. Everybody wanted to go out with Anna, says Houghton. She was very beautiful, and any powerful man with any aspirations would want to be with her. There was an endless line of high rollers who adored Anna and competed for her affections. 2 among them were friends, part of a hard-drinking playboy rat pack of sorts. One was a powerful British advertising executive twice her age, the other a freelance American journalist, a dozen years her senior. Okay, you guys. This first guy we're going to talk about is an absolute snake, and I mean it. Something was wrong with this man, quite seriously. And this book doesn't go into it, but I really think we need to do a deep dive on this guy at another time, because everything he says here, without any sort of shame whatsoever, should have shamed him to the nth degree. His inability to see the scum that he is pretty shocking. And it just makes you wonder, what was he doing behind closed doors if he's willing to talk like this out in the open? He's extremely rude and crass about Anna. And his friend, the one who's going to feature prominently in the next chapter, has some real issues of his own. She was really mixing and mingling with some gross degenerates. And if she wasn't taken advantage of, that would be the story. The story is not that I think that Anna Wintour was taken advantage of as a young child. And I mean, possibly in some of the most heinous ways. I think that is what had to have happened. I don't know, maybe I'm being overly dramatic, but I mean, all night, every night, out and about with people like this, I just don't see how you come out unscathed. I don't care how prickly you are. I don't care how caustic you are. I don't care how long your fangs are. You're a little 5'5" girl. You weigh, 85 pounds. And these nasty old men sniffing around all the day. I mean, tell me how you walk out of that unscathed. Okay, well, anyway, this disgusting man, he says, Anna was attracted to older men, and thank God for that. Otherwise, I wouldn't have had a hope, states dashing John Pringle, who at the time was nearly 50 and had been the chairman of the European branch of the powerful American advertising agency Doyle Dane Bernbach. Oh, God, Anna was much younger, but that never hindered me. I always rather fancied a young woman. What a mess. By the time Anna met Pringle, the ad business was in recession. DDB had lost some big clients, and he had been appointed director of tourism for Jamaica, based in London, with offices worldwide. He was quite successful in putting the island on the map, vacation-wise. He had a big-time family connection there. An ancestor, Sir John Pringle, had arrived in Jamaica, then still part of the British Empire, in the late 1900s, as supervisor of the lunatic asylum in Kingston. He later made a killing by buying up abandoned sugar plantations and planting bananas. Pringle fit Anna's profile. Anna only liked men who were stimulating and exciting, and she would fall in love with that, notes Houghton. Everything else would just be a sex thing. The moneyed Pringle had just ended a long marriage and was playing the field when he was introduced to Anna by a mutual pal at one of the clubs. Why would somebody introduce Anna to this 50-year-old man? Just because he has money? Why would Anna? She's got enough money. Like, she doesn't need to know this guy. She's not hurting. You know, it's not like one of those scenarios of, well, I got myself into some situations because I didn't have 2 pennies to rub together, and how was I going to pay the rent? Like, this is not somebody, Anna doesn't need this guy. And why would anybody introduce her? I just find it very suspicious. Why was anyone introducing her to these people? She doesn't need to know them. She doesn't need them. And it's not like John Pringle was real big in the fashion world. He's over there in charge of the tourist bureau for Jamaica. Other than the fact that the guy had money, who was getting paid off by introducing the two of them? Who was benefiting financially from it? She didn't need the money, and he didn't have a connection she needed. So what did he have? All right, well, anyway. He says, because of the divorce, I was terribly unhappy. I'd been married for a number of years, and I did all sort of stupid things. Anna came into my life during that period, and she was very exciting. You did all sorts of stupid things. Sounds like you're doing a stupid thing. Anna is 21 years old, you nasty 50-year-old man. There's nothing wrong with a man being in his 50s, but there is something wrong with a man in his 50s looking at the 20-year-old. I'm sorry. I know, it's all legal, but it is kind of weird. Why don't you want to date someone your own age, man? A charming raconteur and good-looking man about town, the type who called both male and female friends darling. Pringle was utterly smitten with the chic young assistant fashion editor. Found her extremely attractive. She flirted with me and I had a big crush on her, he acknowledges. I saw quite a lot of Anna. Took her to Annabelle's usual places. She was just so sexy and funny and amusing and attractive, but at the same time, she was a tough little bird. As he got to know her, he found downsides to what he considered to be Anna's intriguing persona. For one, he came to the conclusion, after numerous attempts to seduce her, that she was a tease. Okay, you guys, just buckle up, okay? Because the way he talks about Anna is disgusting. Anna was cold in a very sexy sort of way, if one can cope with that sort of strange statement. She flirted, stuck my tongue in her mouth. She rather liked that, but I never got to bed with her. Like, who talks like that? What kind of self-respecting person talks that way about somebody else, but also about themselves? Like, you sound nasty, man. Like, where is your self-respect? Stuck my tongue down her throat. She like that. He was also put off a bit by her vanity and imperiousness. She always struck me as being incredibly spoiled, very flirty and slightly naughty and enormously secretive. She's not one of those people who disclose their innards to anyone. She never told you anything about her feelings, about what she was going to do or not going to do. She just did it. Yeah, that probably did annoy him. Because somebody like that, you never really have full control over them. And one of the things Anna did was to fall in love with Pringle's best friend, an American freelance writer named John Bradshaw. I was very fond of Bradshaw, loved Bradshaw. He was a complete rascal, and he was magic to women who fell in love with him all over the place. Bradshaw came along, had a crush on Anna, and I had a crush on her, but Bradshaw started effing her. Dude, no! You nasty pig. How did you, it's like he ended a long marriage. How did he manage to stay married that long? Can you imagine being married as this nasty man? Stuck my tongue in her mouth. I had a crush on her. My best friend John had a crush on her. Loved John, but man, really sucked when he managed to start effing Anna, and I didn't. What a disgusting pig. All right, well, let's read about Mr. Wrong, as this chapter says. Meeting Mr. Wrong is the title of this chapter, and Mr. Wrong would be John Bradshaw. Okay. This is the story that I'm telling you right now. Keep your ears open and your eyes peeled. Because let me just tell you right now, I'm really suspicious about Anna's parents and what they knew was happening and what they chose to ignore and what they may have been sanctioning at the same time. Up to this point, I've just thought they were rather negligent in their care for Anna, that they would let her come and go as she willed at the ages of 14 and 15. That seemed really young to be giving that much permission. Even if you had said, okay, Anna, you can have the downstairs apartment, but it seems like there would be some kind of rules, some kind of like, hey, this is a curfew, okay? And if you can't manage to stick within the curfew, then you're not going to be able to use that entrance and we'll just close up the entrance. Like, it seems to me that if you were inclined to give permission, you wouldn't give such open-ended permission to anything. unless you either just totally didn't care about your daughter, or you kind of knew what she was up to and maybe didn't care, or maybe is there something in it for her dad if Anna is kind of used by some of these people. Okay, I'm getting way ahead of myself. Stick with me for this story. I don't know what's happening here, but I feel like there's a whole side of darkness that we might need to keep ourselves sensitive to, just because it might explain why Anna is the way she is, particularly her need to control and her secretive nature. Okay, this chapter says that Anna and John Bradshaw, everyone just called him Bradshaw, never John, was introduced in 1972 by their mutual friend Nigel Dempster, who had known Bradshaw since his arrival in London from New York City in the early 60s when he went to work as a freelancer for Queen magazine. Giving a gossip item ring to how he played Cupid, Dempster says, "I introduced them, and Bradshaw said to me, 'Anna's a wonderful girl,' and went off with her to Tramp, the hot celebrity-studded nightclub in posh Mayfair. Afterwards, he told me, 'Anna's the girl for me.' Bradshaw's attraction was that he was a discoverer, an interesting character who came to our city and showed us things we'd never seen before," says Dempster, extolling his friend's virtues. Okay, but this guy's crazy, okay? Just, he's a nut. A dozen years Anna's senior and recently divorced from a wealthy Englishwoman after less than a year's marriage. The two actually had a well-publicized London divorce party. Bradshaw was a devilish rogue with enormous appetites. Of liquor, Johnny Walker Black being his favorite. But anything would do as long as someone else was picking up the tab. Of recreational highs, a toke here, a snort there. Of nicotine, at least 3 packs of unfiltered British Rothmans a day. He also was a gambler who played high-stakes backgammon and wrote a book about it called The Cruelest Game during the days of the backgammon boom in the 70s. The writer Nick Cohen, a close friend of Bradshaw's who penned the New York Magazine story that became Saturday Night Fever starring John Travolta, had an apt description of the man for whom Anna fell hard. His calling cards were wit and charm, a world-class talent for gossip, and good looks of an almost Hollywood order. He carried himself with conspicuous roguery, a Rothman's perpetually dangling from one corner of his mouth and that lopsided shark's grin plastering the other. He sported Turnbull and Nasser silk shirts, Gucci loafers, flashed gold lighters, and a Piaget watch, slathered himself with cologne, tended to speak in mock abusive italics. The awful Mailer, the dreadful Elaine, the unspeakable Timothy Leary. The insults were his style of showing admiration. Awfulness, if married to flair, was golden. His devouring passion was for action. Doesn't this guy sound like the worst? I mean, he sounds so indescribably lame. I think that there is just a flavor to people like this who are just constantly playing the rogue that I just can't even handle. And it's surprising to me that somebody like Anna would fall for him because he seems so evidently fraudulent. Like somebody who is just all the time with this huge personality and like gregarious, loud, everything about them's loud. Their vocabulary is loud, clothes are flashy, the lifestyle is flashy, like everything about them is screaming, don't get to know who I really am. Because they're always putting on a show. There are few things as cringy as people who are constantly trying to figure out how they can get others to like them. I was thinking about it today. I don't think that there is any time when you feel that immediate like, ooh, cringe. That sensation only ever comes on when you can sense that another person is trying to impress you or somebody else around you. Somebody is playing to the expectations of a crowd or of an individual, and that immediately is what creates that cringe feeling. I really can't think of anything else that creates that feeling other than our spirits can sense when somebody else is begging for attention from others, when somebody else like needs approval. That is what creates cringe. And this person is like a walking cringe being, like everything, the cigarette hanging out of his mouth, the mock abusive italics, the unspeakable Timothy Leary. But he really likes the guy. Like, I can't. I just find that kind of behavior contemptible. Just be you. Anyway, men, straight and gay, as well as women, loved and fawned over him. In the new millennium, he'd be typed a metrosexual. Anna found everything about Bradshaw incredibly fascinating and attractive, especially his family background. In New York, Bradshaw's mother, Annis Murphy, a drinker, a smoker, strong and domineering, and was a close friend of Beatrix Miller, the longtime editor of British Vogue, whom Anna would replace in the mid-'80s. She also was a chum of Anne Traherne, the clever longtime fashion editor at Queen, with whom Bradshaw stayed when he first hit London, and who was his entree to start freelancing for the magazine. Bradshaw's father had abandoned the family early on, so beside his mother, he was raised by an uncle, an executive at the Vanguard Press in New York, who helped oversee publication of the 1954 best-selling novel The Bridge on the River Kwai. Bradshaw grew up in a book-filled apartment, in a genteel building overlooking the East River at 72nd Street, where family friends included the writer and Renaissance man George Plimpton and the famed Tiffany's window dresser, Jean Moore. Bradshaw had gone to a prep school in Pennsylvania and later attended writing classes at Columbia University and tried to sell pieces to the New York Herald Tribune before splitting for London. Despite Dempster's assertion of having brought Anne and Bradshaw together as lovers in 1972, there are some who believe they had actually gotten to know each other much earlier, when Anna was in her club-hopping mid-teens. You guys, this is where I am saying to you, something is really suspicious about what Anna's parents knew and what Anna's parents allowed. A journalist who had worked for the Evening Standard in the early 60s and later had an on and off romance with Bradshaw recalls seeing him in Charles Wintour's newsroom, sprawled all over the Londoner's diary desk, making personal transatlantic calls to New York, as early as 1963, when Anna was just 14. Moreover, she recalls seeing him around that same time at the Wintour house. But it gets so much worse. Okay, so there's no possible way that Anna didn't know this guy if he'd been to dinner at their house, and also he worked for her dad. He's at the house, but he's not just there for dinner. Listen, I just have this picture in my mind's eye of being in the house in Fillmore Gardens and seeing Bradshaw and Anna go downstairs to her flat, and somebody saying to me, "Are they living together down there?" It was extraordinary because her father was a stern father figure to everybody at the Evening Standard. He was quite possessive. So why would he allow his favorite daughter to be with this charming guy who never earned a penny is a mystery. Bradshaw might just have been bumming a bed off her down there then, because he never seemed to have a place of his own. You guys, tell me what world does a dad and a mom allow their young 14, 15-year-old daughter to have a man living downstairs in her apartment with her? And they are so wildly, naive that they would never suspect that that guy is some kind of predator? Really? This guy is known to just be a mooch. He's only here living off of all this generosity. He just has the right ends, but he isn't doing a lick of work. Nobody knows how to keep him employed. He's just living off of the generosity of others. And now he's slouching downstairs with Anna and was down there often enough that people thought, is he living there? And Anna's dad is okay with it. Look, I understand her parents had this philosophy of let the chips fall where they may. Anna's got to learn sometime. But there's a part of me that's okay, this permissiveness is not just, we let our daughter, she's a mature person. We let her have her own space. This permissiveness has now reached into boundaries where I'm okay, you guys are either wildly naive, and I don't believe either of you possibly could be because of the circles that you live in. You're either wildly naive, which I don't believe, or you knew something was going on and you condoned it, or worse yet, you knew something was going on and you didn't care. It's weird because Anna's dad is often described as really caring about Anna, but I never really felt that his care for her seemed to extend very far because I couldn't understand letting my daughter go out, 15 years old, to a Playboy party. That seemed crazy to me. Cared about her in what way? In a sort of abstract fatherly way of yes, I have a daughter, I don't want to kill her, so I guess I love her. I mean, what are you talking about? He loved her. So it's weird to me that people always describe that. To me, if you take a neutral stance on protecting your daughter, then you don't try to protect her. But this seems even less than a neutral stance. It almost seems sure, why, whatever, this guy needs a place to stay, we have an extra bed downstairs. In your daughter's apartment? No, you don't have an extra bed. What are you talking about? Was he getting something out of Bradshaw? Was Bradshaw getting something out of what? I guess my question is, was Anna a pawn? Was there something about the scenario in which she was being preyed upon in a really ugly, gross sense? Or what? What's happening here? I don't know. Okay, maybe I'm reading too much into it. It's starting to feel really weird to me. But Anna's personality does seem sort of like somebody who's been victimized. And honestly, I just don't understand any world in which somebody would let some guy come over and then go downstairs to my 14-year-old daughter's room and I'm never going to say boo. I'm never going to go downstairs. I'm never going to be like, hey, what are you doing down here? I see it happening. I'm like, whatever. Weird. Since Dempster was already a friend of Bradshaw's and Dempster was seeing Anna when she was in her mid to late teens, it's likely Anna had met Bradshaw in Dempster's circle, which included the likes of John Pringle, long before they became romantically involved publicly. How and when they met and whether Charles Wintour took friendly to his daughter's latest suitor became a moot point because Anna and Bradshaw quickly became an item and moved in together, renting a partly furnished quaint townhouse in trendy Chelsea. Anna had done a lot of decorating with all very warm touches, recalls Vivian Lasky. She had such style. What were hers I could pick out, the books and the way that they were stacked, the fabrics, and Bradshaw had a lot of very tasteful memorabilia on display. Anna's lover's possessions included a series of stamps that he and his buddy, the photographer Patrick Litchfield, the Queen's first cousin once removed, had produced as a publicity stunt. On a lark, the pair had started a private postal service, Rickshaw Limited, using 6 couriers on Honda motor scooters in January 1971 during a postal strike in central London. "Back comes Royal Mail, posted by the Queen's cousin," declared a headline in the Daily Express. The story was illustrated with 2 photos, one of Litchfield looking amazingly like a Las Vegas Elvis impersonator with coiffed hair and sunglasses, and one of Lord Litchfield's postman, John Bradshaw, straddling a Honda, wearing a hippie-style leather-brimmed hat, loafers, and velvet slacks. He was shown handing over mail to a long-legged and slender beauty in a micro-mini skirt and boots at her shop in Chelsea, who was described as one of their satisfied customers. Lasky first saw Anna and Bradshaw as a couple when she returned to England in June 1972 to attend graduate school at Cambridge's Newhall College. She found him handsome and charming. Anna wanted to pick up where we left off when I went away to Radcliffe. She'd say, "Oh, come to dinner. We're all going. I want you to come and meet my friends. They're all interesting. You don't have anything else to do." Anna was forceful. She was always with a group of men, never other women. Besides Bradshaw, Anna's posse consisted of Anthony Hayden Guest, whom Vivian found amusing and effete, Dempster, who she described as weaselly, and Litchfield, whom she thought of as bright, good-looking, and well-bred. Maybe Anna wanted another girl there because it was all sort of guy camaraderie. If they talked about sports, we'd talk in the corner. She'd say, "We can talk while we eat, and at least we'll get to be together." Lasky looked and felt like a college kid compared to her glamorous assistant fashion editor best friend, who during London's cold and rainy months went about town wearing a dramatic floor-length coat made of fur of a white wolf. Talk about some White Witch vibes. Of all the men in Anna's circle, Lasky adored Bradshaw. He had a teddy bearish quality to him. He was genuine. The only one who would say hi and give me a hug. The only one who had an ounce of warmth. And I thought she needed a warm person in her life. I knew Bradshaw was older, but it wasn't a Pygmalion relationship. He wasn't trying to make her over into something else. Anna was very well-versed, lovely-looking, well-spoken, had read everything, seen everything, and traveled a lot. What man wouldn't want to spend time with her? In fact, it was Anna who apparently tried to change Bradshaw, or at least encourage him, cheer him on in terms of his writing. She knew he had aspirations to write the great American novel, or screenplay, but was too much of a layabout ever to succeed. He needed, she believed, her guidance. Her goal became apparent in intimate letters that she wrote to him, which Bradshaw saw fit to share with his friend A.J. Jack Langeth, a Vietnam War correspondent for the New York Times, author, and much later a professor of journalism at the University of Southern California's Annenberg School for Communications. Langeth, who had had many uproarious adventures with Bradshaw over the years and loved him dearly, was surprised that his friend revealed the intimate and private correspondence to him. He would read them, not with a malicious attitude, emphasizes Langeth, but to let me know that Anna was crazy about him. Anna was seeing herself as Bradshaw's muse, who would inspire him to new heights, cheer him on as a young lady would write to Lord Byron, somehow influencing his life and production. And I knew Bradshaw would play the wounded artiste to the hilt. I'd say, "Come on, Bradshaw, this young woman really has been taken in by this." And he'd say, "Oh, Langeth, I'm a very sensitive person. You don't give me credit for that." From the letters, Langeth came to the conclusion that Anna was sincere, a nice young woman, who he thought was too good for Bradshaw. But Anna and Bradshaw's relationship was far more complex than Langeth had perceived from letters. Others in closer proximity saw Bradshaw as a father figure to Anna, both emotionally and professionally. They felt she played a needy little girl role with him, and Bradshaw was always a sucker for people in need. Because of his connections, he would be able to help her get in the door for jobs and meet the right people after she arrived in New York. As John Pringle notes, Bradshaw was a terribly generous man, and if he liked you, and he loved Anna, He'd do anything to help her. Anna, friends of the couple observe, would come to be the dominant figure in the tumultuous relationship. It was a wild and crazy time, those early to mid-70s years of the Wintour-Bradshaw romance. But Annabel Houghton, who was part of the scene, observes that despite all the partying, Anna was quite solitary. You'd always think of Anna being a part in the group, not needing to be liked, very self-contained. Besides wild nights in the trendy London clubs, Anna and Bradshaw were frequent hangers-on at Shugborough Hall, Patrick Litchfield's magnificent 200-acre 17th-century ancestral home in Staffordshire. For Bradshaw, it was a platinum card freeload. Lots of marvelous food, drink, fascinating men, beautiful women, and servants at his beck and call. For Anna, it was a wonderful environment in which to network. Litchfield, who had snapped his first photo when he was 6, was an influential friend to have if, like Anna, you were trying to make it in the fashion magazine world. He hung out with a new breed of fashion photographers, such as David Bailey, whom he once described as strongly hetero East End kids, as opposed to what had been a mostly gay elite of shooters. But of greater interest to Anna was the fact that Litchfield had developed a close relationship with Diana Vreeland, the doyenne of fashion editors, and had shot fashion for 5 years under her at American Vogue. His fellow photographers included the greats like Richard Avedon and Irving Penn, who also shot for Vogue. He was close friends to designers like Oscar de la Renta, with whom Anna later became friends. Most important, Litchfield was a respected friend of Alex Liberman, the all-powerful editorial director of Condé Nast, who ran the show at Vogue, and down the road would become Anna's guru, mentor, and Svengali. Long before she came to America, Anna's name was known to many of the key players in the upper echelons of the fashion magazine world because of the contacts she made for herself during those fun weekends at Shugborough Hall. For her, working at Harper's and Queen was like a power pitcher working his way up through the minors, but with George Steinbrenner keeping a keen eye on his record. Sometimes Anna and Bradshaw went to Litchfield's with Annabel Houghton and her boyfriend Robert Wade, who managed the British rock band The Kinks. Ironically, the group had put down as obnoxious and pretentious the whole London fashion scene, including fashionistas like Anna, in a rant of a single called Dedicated Follower of Fashion. We did lovely things, reminisces Houghton of the weekend spent with Anna and Bradshaw at Litchfield's country estate. Chauffeurs would take us to the woods, and we'd all be given a gun so we could shoot at helium balloons. Then the butlers would lay out the picnic. There'd be movie shows in the evening. We'd stay all night, and in the morning the women would have their breakfast on silver trays, and then the men would go down to the breakfast room where you pulled the doors back and the scrambled eggs and sausage and everything were, and then the men would read their newspapers. It sounds all very Gosford Park, but Gosford Park was about an industrialist, and Patrick was an aristocrat. It's very different. Then we'd all play tennis and run around on the lawns. He had funny cars for us to drive in and motorbikes. We'd do anything we wanted. But sometimes it all became too much for the lord of the manor, especially if someone like Bradshaw took advantage of the good life the Earl offered to his friends and hangers-on. John Pringle remembered one particular weekend when that little shit Litchfield was in one of his peevish, bitchy moods, and Bradshaw had tummy problems. He was not feeling well, and he'd been staying at that rather grand house for what seemed like weeks, and he knew all the servants. I was sitting at the table, and he says to one of the butlers, "I can't eat very much. Could you make me a bowl of soup?" And Litchfield, at the other end of the table, and there were 18 people at the table, said, "Bradshaw, this is not an effing hotel." I got up and I left the table, and I left the house that very afternoon because he was so rude to Bradshaw. I mean, the guy's been staying there for weeks on the generosity of this guy. Can he not be like, "You don't talk to my servants that way"? A meal has been provided. You're going to eat it. You're not going to be like, "I'd like something else" from the staff that you don't pay. I mean, maybe don't embarrass him in front of the whole table. Maybe pull him aside and be like, "Dude, you're welcome to stay, but you got to eat what's provided. Okay, my people aren't here to just serve you at every beck and call." But it'd be like, "He was so rude to Bradshaw. Can you even believe it?" Well, when this guy's overstayed his welcome to this extent, I mean, at a certain time, you got to give a person a reality check. Bradshaw never forgot the embarrassing incident. After a very raunchy bachelor party thrown for Litchfield just prior to his marriage to Lady Leonora Grosvenor, daughter of the 5th Duke of Westminster, Bradshaw got his revenge. "There were a few girls here and there," says Bradshaw's Jamaican artist pal Willie Fielding, one of the revelers. Bradshaw went and wrote about the whole thing in Private Eye, which came out the day before the wedding. He shat on Patrick, and none of us really wanted to talk to him for a while. In 1974, Anna and Bradshaw had been together for some 2 years. Friends thought they seemed happy, despite the kind of lives they led. "He was always very tender with her," observes the writer Glennie Roberts, a one-time Evening Standard reporter whom Bradshaw was seeing along with other women on the side. It was almost a sort of paternal relationship with Anna, perhaps because her father was very cold and Bradshaw very warm. It might have been as simple as that. Anna was proving herself at Harper's and Queen, where colleagues saw her as becoming increasingly driven and restless for more power. Bradshaw was often on the road, supposedly working on stories and book ideas, but was mainly living the high life with his pals and bedding down with other women. I had sort of an off-and-on platonic romance with Bradshaw, and he'd pass out on my couch regularly, discloses Roberts, who had once been the girlfriend of Monty Python's Terry Gilliam, and later was married to a well-to-do London tailor. I knew Bradshaw was supposed to be living with Anna, but he never rang her up and said, "I won't be home tonight, darling." He collapsed on everybody's floor, so I don't think he was a very good bet for any woman, really. The one thing Bradshaw could do for Anna would be to introduce her to people, because he knew everybody. Anna may have caught on to Bradshaw's womanizing, or been stung by it, or just come to the conclusion that they had an open relationship, because in 1974 she had an affair with one of his compatriots. It all transpired like a scene of a Jackie Collins novel. Anna and Bradshaw had set sail on the Queen Elizabeth II. Anna said to be working on a fashion assignment for Harper's and Queen, Bradshaw hustling money by participating in a shipboard backgammon tournament sponsored by Dunhill. Also taking part was a pal of Bradshaw's, a tough competitor by the name of Claude Beer, the 1974 World Backgammon Champion. Like Bradshaw, Beer was a rascal and a rogue, a darkly handsome, Parisian-born playboy and gambler who'd been spoiled by his mother, who mostly supported him with her second husband's American oil money. "Claude was more fun than anyone could ever imagine," exclaims a female Palm Beach pal, especially when he drank. And Beer loved the bubbly. He and his buddy Nigel Dempster had once gotten into a fight at Stell's, the famous Paris night spot, over a bottle of champagne. Beer won, and then promptly passed out. Beer also was a womanizer who had 1,000,000 girlfriends. 1,000,000, says his Florida chum. On that QE2 cruise, he romanced Anna, who was a dozen years his junior. Dempster noted this shipboard romance in his Daily Mail gossip column. Not once, but twice, a number of years after it had happened. On November 29, 2000, in an item about Anna and Shelby Bryan, the multimillionaire for whom Anna left her husband and the father of their 2 children in the late 90s, Dempster dredged up the quarter-century-old affair. During Anna's romance with Bradshaw, she ran off on the QE2 with noted Palm Beach drunk and backgammon gambler Claude Beer. In a second column dated September 16, 2001, mourning the death of my old friend Beer, who had died of alcohol-related illnesses at the age of 63 in Palm Beach on the same day as the terrorist attacks in the United States, Dempster reminded his readers. Back in 1974, on a Dunhill QE2 backgammon jolly, he fell in love with American Vogue editor Anna Wintour, but that's another story. After the ship reached port, Anna continued to see Beer. According to friends, Bradshaw was furious, and as he made it seem, broken-hearted. They didn't immediately resume cohabitating. It was only after a while that he took her back, but things were never the same. Claude was hot, very exciting, and naughty, says Hoden, who knew him when he was with Anna. He was around with her for a while. She'd never be in love with someone like Claude. I don't know exactly what happened between them, because Anna was very private like that. We talk about boyfriends, but never go into detail. It was always, "Oh, we had great fun." Nothing more. Bradshaw, of course, knew about Anna and Claude, and that was why it was so exciting for Anna, because she was hiding and rushing in and out, two-timing a bit. Bradshaw was a bit vulnerable there. He was just about able to cope because Anna wasn't being too naughty, but Bradshaw played it quite well, let her go as long as necessary. He knew Anna was a different caliber of woman. You had to be jealous of her. Bradshaw's ego had been badly bruised, and his macho image tarnished. Word of the Anna Beer romance had spread quickly round Bradshaw's wide circle of fellow ladies in London, and he himself carried the tale to New York, where he bemoaned what had happened to a friend, the up-and-coming novelist and poetry editor, Joni MacDonald, whom he had met in the early 70s when she was working as an assistant to another Bradshaw pal, Louis Lapham, then the managing editor of Harper's Magazine. One day, this guy with a big cape blew into the office, handsome as possibly could be. Larger than life, looking for work, she recalls, and within 5 minutes, 3 people were saying, "Bradshaw, you owe me money." Bradshaw quickly became one of MacDonald's most dearest and intimate friends, and so she listened with utter horror and overwhelming sympathy when he described how crushed he was by Anna's actions. Bradshaw, however, was the only source from whom she ever heard the story, and she was aware that Bradshaw was something of a hype artist, and that he hadn't always been faithful to Anna. He was a bit of a rake, she acknowledges. Nevertheless, she brought his story of how Anna's behavior on the high seas had devastated him. He told her that there was no problem in their relationship prior to the shipboard event, and he admitted to her that when Anna left him for beer, he got drunk and stayed drunk rather than confront his adversary. Bradshaw was humiliated and horrified and devastated, she says, till still angry and emotional about it years later. It was a hideous thing for Anna to do. Well, yes, but, why does Bradshaw think it's such a big deal if she did when he is falling asleep on all his girlfriend's floors and not even bothering to call her and be like, hey, I'm not going to be home? I don't understand this double standard. At all. If you want to have an open relationship, then you have to have an open relationship. If you want to run around with all these women, you can't act offended when it's like, oh, is that the deal? Okay. From the way Bradshaw described what happened, his feelings in the aftermath, MacDonald saw the boat incident, as she refers to it, as a pivotal moment in the relationship, and she was one of those convinced that things were never the same for them. MacDonald, who got to know Bradshaw and Anna as a couple in New York, points out, he took her back because he loved her, and she did love him, but it hurt. The truth is that Anna was the love of his life. That was clear. But it was the end of the relationship as a romantic relationship. In terms of love, as I saw it, it was over. A year after the QE2 incident, Bradshaw's first book was published. Fast Company profiled professional gamblers. The dedication page reads, "For Anna." The two would have an all-consuming and tumultuous relationship, one that spanned 2 continents and simmered and boiled on and off into the 80s. I just feel like I just can't get a handle on who this Anna person is. I don't get this person. I do want to give her the benefit of the doubt as far as like her behavior, but I think what's really hard about this book is I feel like I can't get a grasp on her. Like, I feel like she is a character in a story that we're hearing about, but she seems she seems almost like a side character to the plot of the whole story. Because we have all these other people talking around and talking about the scene and the cultural moment and all of this, but I don't really feel like we know anything about Anna. And how could we? Because she's so secretive. Obviously, that's what continues to be stated. But I think it would have been a very uphill battle for Mr. Oppenheimer to write this book because I don't know anything about her. Honestly, even the scenarios that they continue to give us about like, well, then this happened and that happened, I'm being told in the vaguest terms about the incident. Okay, but what are the details? Does anybody remember? Or is it that same scenario? Well, it was the 70s, so if you can remember, you weren't really there. Like, was everyone so high, so drunk, so out of it that they don't remember what happened? Because I feel like this book is interesting, but tell me what you guys really think. Aren't we a little vague on the details? Aren't we just like talking around things a lot? But who is Anna? I know who she dated. I know what she does. Who is she? What is she like? I feel like I just don't know anything about this person, and we're 12 chapters in. All right. But don't you guys think something else happened that we're not really getting? And I don't think we'll ever know for sure, because the only person who could really tell us what happened is Anna, and I don't think she ever would. But I feel like there's something else that happened with Anna. And I also feel like there's something weird about her dad. I think it's really weird that her dad would know there's all these older men preying on her young daughter, and he's like not lifting a finger to do anything about it. Was there some benefit in him was there some kind of social benefit or otherwise that kept him from stepping in like he should have? Like, this is beyond just negligence. I don't understand the story we read about Bradshaw going down and staying with her in her house, in her apartment when she's 14. And nobody says boo about that. Obviously, the parents were pretty loosey-goosey when it came to who Anna had down there and what she was doing down there. I think they were probably all just crossing their fingers and hoping she didn't get pregnant. But they didn't seem to want to stop it or do anything differently. But now we get information that her dad knew that there was, like, he had a house guest over and then the house guest is going downstairs with Anna. I mean, it's just like, what is happening here? And is that why Anna's such a strange person? Is that why she won't let anybody in? Because she's afraid they'll reject her if they know what's really happened with her. Which, of course, is not her fault if she really was victimized. But, I don't know. It's a lot of weird things happening here. And for her to be in a relationship with Bradshaw and know he's running around on her, and for her not to end the relationship over that, it seems like a very strange thing for somebody to do. It isn't as though it was her husband or they had kids or something and she's like, I have to stay with him, I have to try to figure this out. Why would you stay with somebody who you know valued you so little? Unless you were just kind of used to being used and abused as somebody's property. I don't know. Maybe I'm really reading into this. You guys let me know what you think. All right, I better let you guys go. We've been talking for a minute. I'll see you guys later. Thanks so much for hanging out with me. I'll see you guys soon. Bye.